Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the official Do Good Better podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Kirby. And of course, we talk with people who are going to help our small and medium-sized nonprofits do good better. One of the things I know you're going to do good better at, but you probably have no idea where to start, is grant writing. I know it's a dirty word. I know instantly you have anxiety wash over your entire body on the fact that you've got to go and dive through endless websites and try to understand the language and a process and a cycle. Don't you worry. It's what this podcast does is brings in the smartest human beings on the planet to tell you how to do it. I really am excited for this next guest. Our guest today, Holly Rustick. How are you? She is the CEO of Grant Writing and Funding. So you know you're going to get legit, fantastic information. She's also a best-selling author. Holly, welcome to the official Do Good Better podcast.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited. I love your podcast. I was totally binging on it yesterday. This is awesome. As I was saying, I was like, wow, that's so cool. Like you did the shorter, we were talking in the green room before and you're like, yeah, I do mix it up. And I was like, that's such a cool concept of having shorter and longer podcasts and everything and different experts and people in the field and on boots on the ground, all of that. So thank you so much for having me and adding me to your repertoire of podcast episodes. I'm super excited to be here.
I have a feeling that this will be a very downloaded episode because the topic of grant writing is so beyond, I think, people's comprehension. If you've never done it before, it's super overwhelming to those who maybe have dabbled in it. And then it's how do you build this as part of your legged stool, if you will, for funding for your organization? But we're going to get into all of this. It's going to be fine. But before we get started, people are going to find us on iTunes and Spotify and YouTube and all this good stuff, but they probably don't know you as well as they should. So could we kick off the podcast by giving a 5,000-foot view on who you are, what you do, and why we're talking today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah. So who I am? Well, I'm Holly Rustick. And as you mentioned, of Grant Writing and Funding. And so we do a lot of really cool things. We help nonprofits and grant writers just get more comfortable with the grant writing process. And we really build it out. We also help people if they're interested in getting paid as a freelance grant writer to move into that dimension. And, with the Great Resignation, or as I like to call it, the Great Redistribution, we have a lot of folks, wanting to do something different or wanting to work from home or wanting to work for themselves, in that position. And it's a great opportunity because so many nonprofits, as you mentioned, are overwhelmed with grant writing. And it's just not something they want to put in their toolbox right now because it's not really in their purview of their job, right? So it can be kind of distracting, but they know it's necessary. So we do a lot on helping nonprofits get funding, training people to help nonprofits and so much more. But I just love it. And I also have a podcast too. So Grant Writing and Funding. So you podcast listeners out there and you YouTube viewers, you might enjoy getting a lot of our free resources that we have for grant writing, freelance grant writers, and even nonprofit strategic planning and other things that are really important to make sure your nonprofit is set up so you can start receiving grants, right? So really exciting on all those fronts.
Again, you can always tell it's going to be a good guest when you're as enthusiastic about the topic as your guest is, and then vice versa. And so this is going to be, hold on to your butts, everybody. This is going to be a great one. I'd like to start out with this one, which is, again, I think the concept of grant writing is overwhelming. What's one of the biggest misconceptions or one of the biggest sort of worries that overhang a nonprofit organization when they start to get into or start considering grant writing as an opportunity for funding?
Yeah, there's actually a lot of misconceptions with grants in general and grant writing as well. And one of the a couple of the biggest ones, I have the main myths, right? One of the big myths is that grants are super easy to get. So you have one extreme where they're just like, oh, there's free money out there. It's free money. That's another misconception. It's free money. I mean, it is in a sense free, but there's always strings attached, right? And they're saying, okay, it's free, it's just everywhere, you can get it easy, all these other nonprofits are getting, why can't we just throw an intern in and they can just do it? End quote. You have that far extreme. And then the other extreme is there's no way we could get any grants. It's way too complicated. Let's not even try. So you have these kind of different views on it. And I love that you're starting with the misconceptions because that's what I think a lot of this is. And, the other part that's huge on this, Patrick, is that it's about money. And people that's one of the most emotionally like driven topics is money. When we just start discussing our relationship with money, how we handle it, what our perception is as far as like a lot of nonprofits are like penny pinching and they have this poverty mindset. So when they look at grants, they're like, let's try to bid low, or that's too much money. So there's a lot of just emotionally driven, issues around it because it is about money. So it's really an interesting thing to look at all of these moving parts and to say, okay, there's a lot of myths out there about the grants in general, right? And then it's also a topic that's so just, emotive. So it's like, okay, we got to really break this down. And I actually like to start from there before we even start thinking about grant writing. It's what is your mind around money, right? So how do we kind of get there first before we even look at applying for money,
I don't think I've ever heard it phrased like that, because that's so unbelievably true, is that I think some people even go through what if we get this?
Yeah.
And they go through this whole like trauma response before it even happens of like, well, then we have to do this, and then we have to do this, and then we're expected to grow. And it becomes this whole anxiety monster that is sitting out there before you even get started. You're imagining this crazy life that you're going to have. It's like imagining if you win the lottery and then you're worried about like what boat or yacht or house you're going to buy in the first place.
Taxes.
Like,
I got to pay taxes then.
Slow down. It's going to be great. So I love that as a concept. And then, sort of how do you what's a first step to kind of get over some of that though? Because there's got to be, to acknowledge it, number one, too.
Yeah.
But like, what do you do after you're like, okay, I can accept the fact that we are worth this and we might get this. What do we do next?
Right. And then, really it's about taking a breath, breaking it down. And I always say, once you realize, okay, there's grants out there, they're not all for us. There are strings attached, right? You have to understand, like, it is a relationship, right? So it's any contract, any award, anything like that is always also a relationship, is how you have to look at it, right? Now, all of a sudden, we're not just begging for money, please give us money, sending in an application once a year. Like, there's totally a strategy to it as well. Because you have to think about, do I want to even develop a relationship with this funding source? Do they align with our values and our priorities? And once you kind of look at that and you kind of reframe it to say, okay, this funding source has a priority and they want to give out money basically to subcontract their mission, right? To help achieve their own mission. Do we fit into that? And if you strongly feel like you do and your programs would support that mission of that funding source, then you can think about, do we want to develop a relationship with them? And if you do, then you can apply for the grants. That's how I always say, that's how you really want to set it up. It's not just about where's the money, but it's about where are the partners, right? Funding sources are partners. That's how you should definitely look at them. It's not just about money, they're money gods.
So if anybody's ever listened to this podcast, this should sound extremely familiar, because we talk about this all the time when we talk about donors. Donors is nothing about telling a story and building a relationship with people who have the capacity to give, and you're aligning your values with individuals. This is the same damn thing. And I am so stoked that you said that, because that now dispels every sort of like, well, I can't do it, or I shouldn't do it. You're already doing it. Now you've got to put that same sort of brain power to use when you're going with funding partners rather than individuals or businesses that you want to partner with in the first place. Brilliant, freaking brilliant. I love that.
Thank you. Yes. And I love that you guys always, that just resonates, and it just reinforces what you guys talk about, because it's totally true. And it is the hat you should be wearing. And it does then, like you mentioned, it dispels a lot of those myths, like, I'm not good enough for this, or what happens if I get it? How do I handle it? They're going to have too many restrictions. I shouldn't do it, which could be the case, honestly. But unless you understand, is that a relationship you want to go into, right? That can actually help you mitigate. Sometimes it's not good to go after certain grants, even if your eyes light up and start sparking because there's lots of zeros on there, right? Sometimes that's not a good place to go. And I've seen organizations grow too fast, right? And I've seen organizations who say, you know what, we got a lot of programs going on right now. We have a lot of the manpower. Yes, we could definitely get more grants if we applied, but let's just wait till next year because we're in a good place right now and we can handle this. So there are things to think about like that, but if you just go in thinking, I'm not going to be able to handle that, that's not necessarily the case, because you can also think the funding sources that give you the money, don't you think they want you to succeed? You know what I mean? They're giving you money like to help their mission, really, their priorities, right? So even though it's your program, it's helping them meet whatever their big audacious goal is, right? So when you think about it like that, communicate. Remember, it's a relationship. If you do hit, things where things have to change, which happens all the times in grants, right? You have to sometimes modify budgets, modify programs, life happens. You talk to them. Their program officer that you deal with should be your best friend, should be on speed dial. You should know them by first name. They should know you by first name. You know what I mean? Like, get to that point, even federal grants, guys. So even federal grants, I'm not just talking the little tiny foundation grants. Federal grants, I'm always best friends with those program officers. You know what I mean? So
see, here's
not a lot of people reach out to them.
No, and this is another interesting thing, because I think as part of the misconceptions piece that we kind of kicked off with is you're sending it into this abyss of paperwork that nary a person will ever see. It's just going through a filing system or whatever sort of mystery computer system it is that's going to pick out keywords, and you're going to either get yes or no. You never put, and generally speaking, as a nonprofit leader, you don't put a face or a name with a specific person who is in charge of organizing all of this. I think that's one of, I mean, to a lot of people listening, the fact that you just mentioned that is going to blow their minds away, going, wait, I'm sorry, there's an officer involved, there's a person involved. This is not some sort of like dark hole of information that this just goes, we hope we get picked in a filing system. Please go on about this, because this is really one of the key things. It goes back to the relationship building piece, that there is a face, a name, and a person behind all of these grant opportunities for you.
No, I love that you mentioned that, because can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Okay. So anyway, I had to adjust something, but yeah, it's so important because there is a face. And and the thing is, if you're having the strategy of you're going to apply for a grant just once a year when it's open, that's the only time you're going to contact the funding source. So say it is a foundation. The only time you ever contact them is once a year when you send in the application and say, give us money. All right. Or, right. Is that forming a relationship, asking for money once a year? Or once every time their funding cycles are open? No, that's not trying to form a relationship, right? And it's like, yeah, the federal ones, yeah, they have their own way of doing things. But at the same time, you can reach out to those program officers any time of the year and say, hey, we're interested in this, applying for this grant when it does open up again. This is what we do. Like, would this be a good fit? This is what we're thinking about. Start forming relationships with a person, because so many of the times there is a program officer on that website, on that funding opportunity announcement, that you can actually contact. And I say, even for foundations, when it might be a little bit harder, there's gatekeepers, or their websites might not be very robust for their point of contacts, still invite them. Say, hey, could we come to one of your board of director meetings, and just take 10 minutes of your time and just share what we do, because your priority, what you guys are doing, we align with that so well. Make sure you align with it very well. You know what I mean? That's another thing. And ask to come. And I would say, invite them to your fundraisers. Don't ask them, don't sell them tickets, invite them. Once again, you are trying to form a relationship. And especially with foundations, if you get grants there, you can become long-term grantees, right? You can become, like, year after year getting grants from them if they form a relationship with you. They love what you do. You really connect. You're really driving home their priorities as well. And that is creating a relationship, right? So even federal, reach out to their program officers, tell them about your programs, ask them questions. I'm always calling, emailing, asking, and I feel like they know that. They feel like they are in the abyss because so many people don't reach out to them. So when I reach out to them, they're like, hey, you know what I mean? Someone's calling me. I'm the one who's helping give up money, and you're actually calling me and talking to me, and I know who you are. And it's such a good thing. So put a face and name, all of that, to the funding source. Remember, it's a relationship, and try to build it out from there. Don't just beg for money and ask for once a year. That is not about forming a relationship. right?
I hope everybody is paying attention to this. And I hope you're once again connecting all of the dots to the things we've been talking about for the last, I don't know, 200 odd episodes. It is not if you only call your donors once a year at the end of November and say, it's the end of the year, we're looking for money again. Or the only time that you call is if you're trying to sell a ticket to the gala every single year and you don't say thanks, and you don't ask for their perspective, and you don't talk about their impact, and you don't do anything else, they know exactly why you're calling. And the minute that they decide they don't want to give you money anymore, they'll just hang up. They serve no purpose in answering the phone because they know exactly what you're looking for. And the other thing that you mentioned, how this is really interesting, is that the program officers will often ask about the impact. And if you're telling them about what the grant did, do you think they're not going to tell and brag about other things or other officers or other people within the community about how their grant affected the community positively because they understood what it did, because you told them what it did, and all of a sudden they're now being ambassadors on your behalf? Do you think they're not going to want to continue the same way that if a donor gets a note from you the saying this is what your gift did and this is the impact that it made, that they're going to tell their friends? It's the same thing. I don't know how many times we have to say this during the podcast, Holly. It's brilliant though, because you're personalizing something that not a lot of people think is a personal relationship at all. This is the brilliance of this conversation.
Yeah, they're so separated from the money. It's so interesting. It goes back to that kind of emotional based relationship with this money, right? So that's why we need to start there. And then when you get there, it's like, no, it's about a relationship, and it's about really being a subcontractor of doing your program so it fits somebody else's priorities. And that's how grants are. And the other thing I would love to mention on this too is another myth is that, you shouldn't be 100% grant funded either. And this is coming from a grant writer, that's my business, right? But I'm saying diversification of your funding sources is super important as well. Not just to think, oh, it can all go on this grant and all we need to do is get the grant money and it's going to happen in 2 months after we form our nonprofit and I'll be making as much money as I did, right away as an executive director as a nonprofit as I did as a CEO of a large company before I quit 2 months later. There's a lot of that too. It does take time, we've been talking about, to develop relationships. It doesn't happen overnight, but if you commit to this process of reaching out, of only applying to the grants that are really good fits, that you really you're passionate about the funding source and what they're doing with, actually what they're doing too, then it will be really, really advantageous and beneficial for your long-term strategy, right? But you definitely don't want to be 100% just funded either your nonprofit from grants, because grants, what they are really is startup money, seed capital, right. A lot of it, expansion, and they're only around for a certain duration of time, you know? So, I mean, that's important. I did say, if you get into foundations and they love you, you could get year after year funding for quite a while. That's a long-term strategy, but it should not be your only one. And you should never look at grants as long-term funding, right? So that's the other thing, is sustainable pieces of money.
Yeah. So, and, thinking of it as finite allows you then to build these other pillars that you get to stack upon. And then it becomes maybe bonus bucks. It becomes expanding money. It becomes these kind of fun things that you can do that you've always wanted to, but you didn't have the cash to do it. But now that you've had these resources, and it's a whole. I love that as part of a long term, but even part of a long term, and that long process begins with at least a little baby step. And I know under the grant pantheon of things that are that you need to write about or have available, I'm wondering if you can kind of give us maybe some really high level or really basic things that you as an organization should have at the ready before you start the grant process. Let's just say your mind's right. I know that we're aligned correctly. There's a grant available and I'm going to go and write for it. What do we basically need? Or what are the first things that we should get ready so that we're not scrambling to go, oh crap, I don't have anything of this stuff before we even start?
Right. Yeah, that's so important, right? I mean, one of the main things that you need is your 501c3 or your 501c6, however, whatever your formation, your tax exemption, like that's
Yep.
super important. A lot of people that reach out to nonprofit consultants that I train, or even to myself, and they're like, hey, we're ready to apply for grants, and they don't even have their tax exemption yet, right? So we definitely need that. You want to have your bylaws, you want to have your articles, you want to be incorporated. But beyond that, even if you already have that, that's step number one. Then you definitely want to understand what your program will do. And what I like to do, and I train a lot of people to do, is develop a master grant application, which is actually a template, right? So, and basically what it is a business plan, right, for your program that you're looking at developing. So once you have that, and that what that does is when you create, okay, well, here's the goal of the program, here's how much money we're going to need, here's how many people we're going to serve, or what we're going to do, right? What is our impact? You're starting to think about a lot of the questions that will be asked in grant applications, and you're getting ahead of the game. And it doesn't have to be a complete full draft, but you need to have some kind of draft, because then you can start looking for grants. If you do it the other way, let's not put a program in place, let's just start looking for money, you're going to mission drift potentially, very potentially. So you're going to start seeing dollar signs, and you're going to be like, oh, but we could, you know what, they're asking for this kind of program, we could do that, and it wasn't even on your radar before, and it's completely out of your box. And I've seen so many nonprofits do that, and then they take all this time to write this grant. Sometimes they even get it funding for this program they weren't even going to do. Then they get the money and they're like, oh my gosh, this is sucking away from our other program. Now we're putting our general operating expenses or some of our people in this grant program that it's not even really what we're supposed to be doing according to our mission. It's not really what we're passionate about. And now we have to do all this reporting and we have to fulfill this. And they get focused on this program that's really not even in the purview, right? So that's why I like to say, kind of go back and first, before you even start looking for grants, figure out, what do you actually need money for? Right? What do you want to do? So what is that program? A lot of people know general operating expenses. Well, those grants are a little bit harder to get. They are out there, especially after COVID, right? COVID definitely opened up the door to more unrestricted funds. But let's figure that out. If that's what you need, let's really look at it. And maybe a grant could be one of your streams of income, and maybe creating a product or a service or doing something else to diversify monies for your general operating, right? So that's the thing, is coming back and saying, what do we need money for? Developing that plan, figuring out what that budget actually looks like, how many people are needed for that, what your goal is and what you're really going to achieve by doing that. And then once you have that together, then look for the grants. Figure out who would be a good fit to match you and your program, right? So that would be step number one. Really, after step zero is
zero
tax exemption.
Exactly. Here's the other thing too, and this is what other donors are going to ask you. This is what sponsors are going to ask you. This is what businesses are going to ask for you. This is what people who are, if you're building a building or whatever, this is the basic question that a lot of people are going to ask. And wouldn't this be a great plan for you just to have in general as a nonprofiteer, just to kind of say, okay, here's the programs we have, here's the impact we're going to make, here's the growth plan we have. That gives you a roadmap for the rest of your fundraising. And going back to Holly's point last segment here was, you can't rely on grants alone. So you're going to have to go get other sources of revenue, and they're going to ask the same questions, and you're going to have the same pitch. It's the same thing. I feel like there's a theme that is going back to the theme, which is you just have to have your stuff at the ready and just be prepared for a conversation to develop relationships. And this is just a paperwork exercise that's going to help you do that for everything. What a wonderful bonus on top of, applying for something that you probably are really worried about. Well, this is going to help you in the rest of your fundraising activities. Yeah.
Everything. Yeah. And I even say, one of the beauties of writing a grant. So once you have found that funding opportunity and you've read the funding opportunity announcement and you've developed it and you've very much, customized it towards that, one of the great things is that no matter what, you're going to want funding for that program, because remember, we started with actually asking for money, what we wanted money for. And then, even if the grant doesn't get awarded, which a lot of times it may not, right? I mean, it's not 100% success rate. No one can guarantee that. The thing is now you have developed a product. you've developed basically a business plan. You've done your research, you have statistics, you've made it very concise what your program's going to look at, how many people you can serve with this much money, what the impact is, right? Much of that. Sorry, my speaker is. Can you hear me okay? So one thing that's great about a grant as well is that you're actually developing this business plan, right? It is a product. It is something that can be used. You've done the research, you've figured out how many people you're serving, all of that, right? How much money you need, what the impact is. So even if it doesn't get awarded, which oftentimes it doesn't, right? That's not 100% success rate ever. And the thing is, it's never, and I kind of get this from nonprofit, another myth. I know we talked about like, what myth? There's a lot. It's, oh no, well, if I hire you as a grant writer, what is your ROI or return on investment, and how many grants can you get? It's like, even if it doesn't get awarded, there are magical things you can do with the product that is now developed, right? And that product, like you said, you can pull things, you can put it on your website, you can apply it to corporate solicitation letter, the 2-pager, you can do it for social media things. You have all these stats now that you can share. You know what I mean? Like, you have so much content from that grant application that it is a magical resource, even if it doesn't get funding. So it's really important to look at it to say, this does help every other part of your organization, because you have to be so concise on what you're doing, and you have to be clear on all your outcomes. It's if you're just
no, that's the brilliant part about all of this. I think and this is why I like thinking differently about this whole approach, is thinking about, hey, let's demystify a bunch of this stuff. Look what you get to use the information that you garnered, or you gathered, or you created. I love the marketing aspect of this. My God, that I didn't even think about that. Think about you just pull all this information and you throw it in your 990 every year, and all of a sudden that becomes part of your ability to go and sell to groups that are just trying to check you out on the internet, and they don't need to worry about it because you already built it, because you built the grant. Basics of the basics. I mean, that's pretty remarkable. When let's just say you get all this kind of stuff and you hit everything out of the park on number one, and you get that grant.
Yeah.
I think people are then now into shock mode. What on earth do you do after you get the award? And I'm not talking about executing the plan. Right. But I'm guessing if our trend is correct in the conversation, and we are trying to build relationships, there's probably something that we're going to want to do with the grant funder and and everybody else that I don't think we necessarily think about. All right, we're going to execute the program. Yes. What else do we do that's, I think, maybe under the radar or super important that not a lot of people think of?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing you have to do is read the contract. Read it.
Yes.
Read the contract.
What did we do?
A lot of people sign my name, I got some money, right? But that contract is gold for you. That's what you're going to go back to time and time again. Sometimes there's been negotiations that happen as well. What a lot of people don't like is when they ask for $100,000 and the funding source comes back and they say, here's 75, this is what we have. And then you have to kind of, in that moment, I would say definitely go back and say, at 75,000, what can we do then? Don't just say, okay, money gods, we will take it. We'll take any money. We'll still do the whole program that we built out. We're going to do. Now, if you only got 75K and you asked for 100, you're 100 because you guys all wrote a wonderful budget that made sense with every single deliverable in that grant. It's going to have to change then. You might not be able to serve 100 people, or 10 people with 75,000 that you could have with 100,000. Yeah. You might not be able to hire all the people, right? So you need to also make sure that you're reading that contract, that you're going back if there's any changes in the money or in any of the deliverables on your relationship side, right? Your partner side, that you actually read it and say, okay, do we need to change anything in the grant? So that's really important too, to read it, to ask questions, to have a negotiation period if needed. And of course, to say thank you. The other thing is there's some things in that contract, and this is why I say read it, that might be like, you need to use our logo on things that you've purchased and things like that. And you might need to figure out, you have to get their logo from them, or, you need to read all the fine print to figure out, well, what are the deliverables that they need from us as well, that just aren't in our grant, but that are on their side of this relationship that they want us to do.
And, you know, so that's really important too.
Is there an opportunity to go back to the grant officer that we've already become best friends with and say, hey, listen, here's kind of what I'm interpreting this to be, and here's what we think we can do. Am I on the right track, or am I missing anything?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's really good. And, you know, obviously you can see, like, if you said you're going to, you know, reach 10 people with that $100,000 and do this impact or whatever, and they give you that money, then yeah, I mean, you definitely say, okay, we're still on the same page. You know what your expectations are, right? That they have of you. So, but the other thing, like I said, you just need to make sure you read all the fine print to know if you're meeting the deliverables outside of what you wrote in the grant. And then have that conversation with your best friend, like you said, right? Of course, yeah, they're your best friend. And the other thing too is it's next steps. Like right away, you want to celebrate. I say thank you, you know, read the contract, make sure you don't have to negotiate. If you do, you can do that process. Say thank you, figure out any other way that you can kind of welcome them in as a partner now, right? Not just as a funder, but as a partner. You might want to put that up on your website that you got the grant. You can send a press release out. I love sending out press releases and letting your local community know that you have this program now, right? That you got a grant awarded. That's totally newsworthy. You can definitely put that on your website too, and celebrate. You know what I mean? Like give yourself, and especially your grant writer,
Give him a high five, dang it.
Yeah, give them a little love, and then see what the next steps are. And a lot of times, from the program officer side, they, especially like federal grants, they may say, okay, you have to submit all the finances in this way. So we have this training that you attend, and, you know, and we get in the weeds if it's a cooperative grant versus a regular grant. It's going to be a little bit more, you know, they're going to do a lot more, like maybe some webinars with you and some more training and stuff. But you can always ask for more training too from your funding source if you don't really know what to do. Say if you just kind of signed it, it didn't really say a lot in the contract, and you're like, what? Like, we know how to execute, but do we send you quarterly reports? Do we kind of budget do you want to see? Or if it's only like reporting once per year, I'd say still be in contact with them before that, even if it's a $5,000 grant. Like, let them know how it's going as the project goes out. If you have an event built into your grant, invite them. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. Remember, it is a relationship. So definitely keep them attuned. If you did send out a press release, it got published in the paper or online somewhere, even if it's a federal agency, send them that. You know what I mean? Like, send your program officer, hey, just let you know we're in the news about this grant. We're so excited that we're partnering with you. So yeah, I mean, that can get them to also say, hey, we want to feature you at a webinar that we're doing about the grant program. Because like you said before, Patrick, they do want to brag. They want to be an ambassador for you. They want to say, look at the money we're doing and what it's doing for the world, right? They want to see it. So
well,
yeah.
and this gives you an opportunity too. And I love that you said that, hey, let's celebrate, let's send out a press release. Let's brag a little bit about that, because what I think this also does is that if you have funders who, you know, individual donors who don't want to be the first gift to a program, they don't want to be the first thing that happens to invest, or they are, you've got an opportunity to get in front of somebody and you get to say, hey, we've already got $100,000 in money. We were so, this program is so viable that this organization gave us their trust and their dollars. I think that this is something that you would maybe consider joining too. Use this as leverage for other major gifts. You can totally do that. And this is what the best part about having a grant is that you get to have now this other source that doesn't make your major donors, or maybe even like one of your fewer major donors, feel like they're the only ones doing the heavy lifting. This is a wonderful opportunity to say, we're sharing, your burden is now shared with another entity that's really big and really excited about this too. We couldn't have done that without you, and vice versa. And that's kind of a really cool conversation to have with some of the community members that you might be able to get in front of now.
I love that. I love that. Because yeah, grants, what they do is not just give you the money, like you said, to run your program, but they give you the credibility. Like, and that's huge, because if you get a grant, you know that you have to show them certain things in your finances. There's transparency there. There's, you know, finance. It's not just like an individual donor giving you $20. And yes, they want to know where that $20 is going as well, that you need to show. But with grants, at least there's that reciprocal kind of relationship where you do actually have to show it to them. You know what I mean? Like, where the money's going. So you have receipts sometimes, like all of that. So just getting a grant, people kind of know that. They're like, oh, they must be really trustworthy with money, because especially like a federal agency or a foundation or whatever is giving them money and kind of stamping their approval on their nonprofit. then I want to join that too. That's pretty cool. They must have some kind of transparency. They must really, be doing something. So I love that. Yes, you can leverage grants to get other funding, to ask for matching from corporations or donors or anything, right? So you can say, hey, we have this grant, they gave us 100,000, they gave us 75, but we asked for 100 and we still need that 25,000, right? Outstanding, right? To kind of do whatever. And then, yeah, you can definitely leverage it as a match for people to come on board.
Boy, if there was only a place that had more of this information that I could maybe go and I don't know, if there was a conference or something that was out there in the future that I could maybe attend to other smart individuals who'd be training on not only this, but other man, I wish there was something out there, Holly. You wouldn't have know anything that's coming up that
I sure
people
do.
would be interested in joining and learning more about the things that are in your brain about this, would you?
I sure would. I love that segue.
What?
I absolutely do. Yes. So on August 25th and 26th, Mazarine Trays of Wild Women Fundraising and Amanda Pierce from Funding for Good and I already have joined forces with Founded Technologies to present the Nonprofit Consulting Conference. So we're really excited about that because especially if you guys are listening to this and you're like, hey, maybe I could also do a side hustle or a full-time thing at some point, a retirement plan. I actually have a lot of clients this is their retirement plan, right? To get out of corporate world and to be a nonprofit consultant, to actually help a lot of nonprofits with either grant writing, strategic planning, board training, et cetera, right? So if you're interested in that, then you want to attend this amazing conference where we have 2 days online, so you can attend anywhere from the world. And we have amazing speakers coming up. We have Michelle Rohr from Secret Alpha Side.
So many different people coming into the mix on this that you guys will definitely want to join and get all the information on how to actually become a nonprofit consultant and how to make it successful, whether it's side hustle, full-time, etc. You guys are definitely going to want to check it out. I'm really excited about it.
Again, I think, coming from the nonprofit world and you end up in this little career that we end up in, it's really beneficial to use all the knowledge you gain institutional wise. And how can you pass that on to the next generation? Well, it might be a side hustle like this would be great. But here's the other thing though, boy, is there a book out there? I don't know, is there like a beginner's guide to grant writing that I could go and download or go get to sit on my shelf that I've had questions about these kind of things, Holly?
Yes, absolutely. So at grantwritingandfunding.com, we have a ton of resources. We have our beautiful Hub Haven where we have resources on our grants formula. So if you want a worksheet, you want a checklist, and you want mini videos to actually say, oh my gosh, how do I go through looking at funding opportunity announcements? How do I actually write a goal? How do I write an objective? How do I write a budget? I actually have a free video series for you.
Of resources too if you just want to get the top 10 tips to position yourself and your nonprofit for funding and so much more. And if you're interested in being a freelance grant
for you at grantwritingandfunding.com.
I love it. We're going to have all of those links in the show notes per usual, everybody. So at the end of this podcast, get your butts over there and click on everything. Go find yourself and get yourself a spot just in case you wanted to do this kind of thing at the conference coming up at the end of August, and then go over to the website and go click on a bunch of the freebies. This is the best part that we do is sort of bring on guests who have these wonderful resources for you, dear listener. And by the way, when you're clicking on the internet, you haven't signed up for this podcast, you haven't followed this, if you're not a subscriber, go and click on this for goodness sakes and give a 5-star review for Holly specifically. Alone is a 5-star review here, and then go back immediately to the show notes and go find what Holly's up to and go join. First of all, thank you so much. It is a joy to find somebody who is enthusiastic about this kind of stuff as I am. It's a wonderful conversation that we had. Number 2, thank you for being a voice of reason when it comes to grant writing and sort of unveiling this whole like cloudy secretive sort of crew here that everybody can actually do this, but not rely on it solely kind of bit here. And again, thank you so much for your perspective and your time and your talent sharing with us here on the official Do Good Better podcast.
Thank you so much, Patrick, for having
me. I enjoyed this session and I can't wait to have you on my podcast. So thank you again, and all the wonderful work you're doing here on this podcast. I'll definitely be sharing it with my people as well. So you guys are definitely doing good better. Thanks so much.
You are the best. All right, see you later.